Hello, 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 all my beautiful people. My name is Aidan, wanna be and trying to be Mel Kiper, but never will be Rouse. And welcome to part one of a three-part series where I will be providing all-around coverage of the 2025 NFL Draft. Today, part one will be going over the pre-draft process and me doing a mock draft in which I will predict which prospects will be falling to which teams and provide my reasoning for why for it. And there's not really much beyond that, so it's time to go over my official mock draft 2.0. Alrighty, so I'm going to be using the NFL mock draft database simulator to make my predictions here, mainly because it's one of the only free mock draft simulators that actually lets me do trades without putting it behind a paywall, unlike some other companies. Not going to name names, but if you know, you know. But anyways, it's time to start this mock draft. We got the Tennessee Titans at number one overall, and this pick has been basically penciled in for months. It's going to be Cam Ward, the quarterback out of Miami. My quarterback one of this draft class. He has the most superstar potential, in my opinion. And I mean, they weren't going to go into this year with Will Levis as their quarterback. They desperately needed an upgrade. You don't pick number one if you're most of the time. You're not picking number one if you don't have if you have a quarterback you believe can be the face of the franchise. Tennessee's been in a bit of limbo since Tannehill proved to not really be the answer, but I believe they do have their future franchise quarterback in Cam Ward there for the taking, and he seems to know it with all his comments about Calvin Ridley and Treylon Burks being one of the best receivers in the league. Seriously though, dude, Treylon Burks, like, come on. Now we're on to number two overall with the Cleveland Browns, and here's the thing. Abdul Carter sounds like a fascinating player to pair with Myles Garrett. That would be a very deadly pass rush duo, but when you're in this spot, I think you just kind of need to think about addressing needs, and there are two needs here, as you can see right here, that I believe need to be filled, cornerback and wide receiver, so why not get the guy who I believe can do both. Travis Hunter, I think will be a Cleveland Brown. It's a very sensible move in my opinion. He's a unicorn of an athlete. Of course, there are the interviews of Stefanski and other Browns management seeing Hunter as a wide receiver first and a cornerback second, but I think that is the direction he's going to have to take his NFL career if he wants to truly last a long time. I don't think you can handle the amount of snaps trying to be a high impact corner and play receiver sparingly. I just think the physicality of having to consistently tackle 220-pound running backs who are just way faster and way more physical than they are in the college level. It'll be easier to translate your dual threat ability if you're a wide receiver first than a cornerback. Next up at number three is the New York Giants, a team where I originally had them trading back and having Carolina jump them to the number three spot. But the more I've sat on it, Giants management has come around and saying that you can't have enough edge rushers in this league, and despite them, they do have a very formidable pass rush with Kayvon Thibodeau. But again, I have to follow his logic here. You can never have enough edge rushers, and this is coming from a Broncos fan in which we had an offseason where we got Kyle Fuller and Ronald Darby, and we thought our cornerback room was set, but only for them to turn around and still pick Pat Surtain, and that pick very obviously worked out for us. I think we're going to see kind of the same logic here. You can never have enough edge guys, especially one who I think could be a franchise edge rusher. So I think the Giants are going to take Abdul Carter and will probably wind up trading, say, Kayvon Thibodeau in the offseason. I think Carter could step in and be an instant impact day one starter, and could also be a guy who could be very much the face of this franchise, be the next, what was his name again? The guy on Good Morning America, whatever. Michael Strahan, that was it. The guy on Good Morning America, that's crazy. But I think Abdul Carter has the chance to be the next Michael Strahan or Justin Tuck for this Giant squad. Then we get to number four with the New England Patriots. I think their number one player on the board is also Travis Hunter. I don't think there are players in the skill positions that are good enough to really warrant picking the number four pick on. So I think they're going to address the O-line, and they're going to draft Will Campbell. Now, the big sentiment around Will Campbell this entire draft process has been his arms are too short. I don't have that same sentiment with him, because if you played on offensive line or been around an offensive line, arm length doesn't really matter as much as you think it would. He still has an amazing first step. He still has amazing power. He's able to drive. I mean, he managed to hang around in the SEC, which has unbelievable pass rushers. I think Will Campbell will be just fine, and worst case scenario is later in his career he has to transition into the guard spot. I don't think that's a bad career option at all for him. I think Will Campbell will be an anchor on that offensive line for years to come and be a very formidable pass protector to help Drake May truly be able to develop into, hopefully, New England's next great quarterback. Now we move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, there have been some rumors swirling that some team might trade up to 5 or trade up to get Ashton Genty and presumably hop in front of the Raiders in order to get him. Some people have even said that the Jaguars themselves will take Ashton Genty because he's that good of a prospect. I'm not necessarily sold on that. I don't think the Jaguars need Ashton Genty. I think they just need to improve on that defense. I don't think there's any teams that necessarily are close enough to be able to feasibly pull off a trade up into the top 5. So I think the Jaguars stay where they are. I don't think they take Ashton Genty. I think they're going to take defensive lineman Mason Graham out of Michigan, mainly for the fact that Mason Graham is one of the best players in this draft. Obviously, he is a very safe and boring pick, but he's a guy, he's going to be an anchor on that defensive line for years. And for a team that desperately needs to improve their front seven, he's going to be an instant upgrade to that front seven. And I think maybe, just maybe, Mason Graham will help the Jaguars front seven harken back to those Saxonville days where they had an incredibly dominant D-line. Hopefully, but we'll just have to see how it all plays out. Then we move on to the Raiders, who desperately need a running back, and guess who happens to fall to him? One of the best running back prospects we've seen in a good bit. This one's going to be a no-brainer. It's going to be Ashton Genty to the Raiders, which is going to create a sneakily good offense for the Raiders. And I think in a year or two, you give them some time, could develop into something really special. So for a team that's trying to win now like the Raiders are, which I don't think is the wisest decision ever, but then again, Pete Carroll is too old to be trying to guide a full-on rebuild, so I guess they did the most they could with the situation they were given. I think Ashton Genty is going to be a home run pick for them. I mean, Josh Jacobs was so dominant for them for so long, and now they automatically get another really great running back. And hint the sarcasm in my voice when I say I can't wait to see Ashton Genty and Brock Bowers tear up defenses in the AFC West for years to come. But unless they somehow manage to fumble Genty, this is going to be a home run pick for them. I can guarantee you that. Then we got the Jets at 7, and this one is really interesting because they could go for a potential franchise quarterback in Shedeur Sanders, even though they do have Justin Fields. They could go for another receiving weapon for Justin Fields and Tyler Warren, who I think is one of the more surefire offensive players in this draft. Or they can go for the extra protection on the O-line with Armand Membu. And for this one, I think they go with the surefire pick of Armand Membu. I'm never going to blame a team for trying to upgrade their offensive line in the draft. Not the sexy pick, but it's one that I think will always pay the most dividends if they hit. Membu is just shot up draft boards after having an amazing combine. I think he has the measurables to really help that Jets offensive line that has desperately needed help for a good while now, and give Justin Fields some added protection to maybe potentially turn his career around. We'll see. It's the Jets, but hopefully Membu can be an instant impact player and potentially lead a feel-good story with that offensive line at the helm. Then we get to the Panthers, another interesting pick because they do have some interesting options. They could go and add more weapons for Bryce Young, who had an amazing end to 2024, with a guy like maybe Ted McMillan, add some receivers, or maybe, again, Tyler Warren being right there. But but the defense so desperately needs someone or anyone to be able to step up and become an impact player. So I think they're going to go defense, and I think they're going to improve on the pass rush first. I think they're going to take Jalen Walker. He's just an excellent pass rusher all around. I think he could go a guy who is very plug and play. You can have him start day one. And for a team that I think is on the upswing like the Panthers, I think Walker is just the most sensible pick to really provide some life and juice to that defense. Then we got number 9 with the New Orleans Saints. Now, I will say this. If the Saints were a smart franchise, they would be staying 50 yards away of Shedeur Sanders, because I will say this about him. He has talent. His accuracy is undeniable. It's probably the best accuracy of this entire quarterback class. But I do not think he's a first-round level prospect. I think he holds onto the ball too long. His arm strength is subpar, and I think there are some attitude issues there that will eat him alive at the next level. That you don't have the protection of Dion anymore. That if those attitude issues show up, the league will eat him for breakfast for it. So if I were the Saints, I would be trying to improve upon that defense. Get maybe Will Johnson or Jade Barron. But this is the Saints we're talking about. Despite them having a rookie head coach who will have a lot of job security and having a GM with infinite job security, they have every single reason to play the long game. This is the Saints we're talking about. They're not going to do that because Mickey Loomis is terrible and refuses to admit that this team needs to rebuild. So in that idiocy of the Saints, they believe they can win now. With Derek Carr potentially being out for the year, they're going to go with the sexy pick and pick Shedeur Sanders. Will he work out? I don't know, because it's just complicated, because I don't think Kellen Moore has had the undertaking yet of having to develop a rookie prospect quite like Shedeur and having to develop him and mold him into his ideal quarterback. I think it could work out. He does have some weapons there like Chris Olave and Alvin Kamara when he's healthy, but it's going to be a bit of an undertaking, and I think it's going to be more of a panic move than anything. They have every reason to play the long game, but I think they just panic. They take Shedeur Sanders and handcuff them to him for about 3 years. Then we get to number 10 overall with the Chicago Bears. Now, they do have some needs. They need an offensive tackle to protect Caleb Williams. They might need a running back. But there is one player here that hasn't gone yet that I think he is one of those instant impact day one type of prospects that I think they will have an instant positive impact on their team from pretty much the get-go. And that's Tyler Warren. Now the reason I point that out is because Ben Johnson likes to play a lot of 12 personnel, which basically includes 2 tight ends. He has Cole Kmet already, but I think they can make that tight end room even stronger and make that 12 personnel so much more deadly and give Caleb Williams another deadly weapon to throw to by taking Tyler Warren. So I think they take one of the more surefire prospects this draft and take Tyler Warren with the 10th overall pick, which I think will be a home run pick for them. And who knows what happens to Cole Kmet, but I think under that Ben Johnson scheme, both of those tight ends are going to shine and potentially help Caleb really turn it around in Chicago. And maybe he's the thing that finally gets Chicago a 4,000-yard passer. You never know, man. Then we move on to number 11 with San Francisco. They got mauled alive in free agency. They lost so many key players and key roles. They're soon enough going to have to pay Brock Purdy, which is going to cost them a lot of money, and they're going to have to probably let go of even more players because of it. So the Niners are stuck, and they're kind of in a spot now. They really more than ever need to start hitting on their draft picks. I see this being a purely defensive draft for San Francisco because of how many players they lost in free agency on defense, like Talanoa Hufanga, like Dre Greenlaw, players like that. And I think they're going to address the secondary first, and I think cornerback is kind of that biggest point of emphasis that they're going to take. It's going to be between Will Johnson and Jade Barron, who is the best cornerback in this draft class. A lot of people say Jade Barron. I think it's Will Johnson. I think he's going to have a bigger impact in San Francisco than Jade Barron. So I think Will Johnson is the pick here. Then we got the team that claims to be all in, yet they do all the opposite, the Dallas Cowboys on the clock. They need receivers. They need a lot of offensive skill positions. They might even need, say, a running back. Omarion Hampton has skyrocketed up a lot of people's draft boards. A lot of people think he could even go as early as top 10. I think, and you look at their running back room, it's nothing really that great. Javonte Williams got signed there. Javonte's absolutely cooked, though, so it's very slim pickings for them over there, but they do also very much need a wide receiver. And I'm trying to think of a good yin to CD Lamb's yang. And I think that's going to be Ted McMillan. I think they could go Omarion Hampton here in the first round, but I think they need a receiver more. They need a good contrast to CD Lamb. And I think a big physical receiver like Ted McMillan. A lot of people said they wanted Matthew Golden to come over here, and I think he could be a really good option. But again, I'm thinking about what would be the best contrast to a guy like CD Lamb, which I think in this case would be able to work even better off of him. I think Ted McMillan is that guy that could really just be able to work amazingly off of CeeDee Lamb. Then we move on to the Miami Dolphins, where their biggest needs lie in the secondary. It looks like they're going to be parting ways with Jalen Ramsey, and they're going to have a big hole in that secondary. So I believe the pick is actually really simple here. I think they're going to go Jahdae Barron, the cornerback out of Texas. Barron, I think they're going to have him basically try to fill that Jalen Ramsey hole that's going to be left with his departure. I think they could have gone offense here, but I think, again, defense was just a bigger need for them. And I think Barron addresses the biggest hole right now, which is secondary, and being able to provide a leader and a spark in the secondary that they haven't had in a good bit. They tried to have it with Jalen Ramsey, but I don't think it necessarily worked out for them. And Barron just also provides more much needed youth and more of an electric spark to that secondary than I think Jalen Ramsey could at his age. Then we move on to Indianapolis, and I think this is where we finally have our first trade in the draft. This has been a rather quiet first round because this is one of the first drafts in a while where all 32 teams have a first round pick. But I believe we see a trade up with none other than Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh will trade up. Let's say they give up their 4th rounder and their 6th rounder, and say their 3rd rounder next year. Why not? They move all the way up to 14 to acquire a running back. I think they're going to get Omarion Hampton because they need a running back. Najee Harris hasn't exactly been as advertised as he was in his rookie season. They do need a running back, in my opinion. I think they like Hampton enough that they're willing to trade up for him and really bounce Denver out of taking a running back in the first round. I think Hampton lands in Pittsburgh. I think it's going to be an exciting. That offense has the chance to be really exciting with DK Metcalf there, George Pickens there, possibly Aaron Rodgers and Omarion Hampton. Like, the locker room may be a headache and a half without a doubt, but I think Hampton can provide another big spark to that running game. Of course, provided Hampton doesn't go absolutely insane from having to deal with DK Metcalf, George Pickens, and Aaron Rodgers on a weekly basis. Of course, assuming that Rodgers comes there, which I think he will do it in the most Aaron Rodgers way possible, which will be staying quiet, probably doing another 90% retired stud, and then waiting until right before the start of the season to sign with Pittsburgh. Then we have the Falcons, in which I think this draft they will do what they should have done last draft instead of taking Michael Penix Jr. They're finally going to address the pass rush because it was non-existent last year. I mean, I saw that game against Denver where Bo Nix threw 4 touchdowns, and it's because they couldn't get a lick of pressure on him. I think this is the draft where they finally go in, put their foot down, and say, no, we're finally going to provide a spark on that edge rushing unit. There are 2 names I've heard linked to Atlanta the most, Mike Green and James Pierce. Both have character issues that I think they need to weigh, but I think Mike Green is going to be the more surefire choice to provide more of a spark to that edge rushing unit and be more of a instant impact player, which if they want to be able to go far with Michael Penix in that offense, they need guys to step up right away. They need to hit on their picks right away. I don't think they can afford to draft any projects, and I think that James Pierce is more of a project than Mike Green is. So I think Mike Green is the pick here. Arizona picks at number 16. They have needs on the defense that I think do desperately need to be addressed, but there's another need on the offense that I think they're going to address in the first round, and that's wide receiver. They're very much committed to the idea that I think they want to provide Kyler Murray with as much weapons as possible because they want to get the most out of him because he hasn't. It's complicated because he's lived up to expectations, but he also hasn't. He's just really been such a weird case with Arizona. They already paid him a big bag, and they need to get whatever they can out of him. And I think the answer to that is just surrounding him with as much artillery as possible. So I look at this receiving room. I think Matthew Golden is going to be the pick here. He's the best receiver left on the board, and he has his ability to be able to consistently run great routes at all 3 levels. I think he'll be a nice contrast to Marvin Harrison Jr. and possibly help him pick up the slack from probably a disappointing rookie season, I think most would say. Golden here, the pick, hook 'em horns, obviously. I'm excited to see what a guy like Golden could bring to Kyler Murray in that Arizona offense. Then we have Cincinnati. Now, it would be so funny if they added another offensive weapon, like, say, Colson Loveland, or maybe another wide receiver in Emeka Ibuka or Luther Burden to really have like a Tyler Boyd replacement and really drive home the philosophy of trying to average 60 plus points a game while your defense gives up 60 as well. But no, they have to go defense. It really feels like the Bengals have tied themselves into a spot where they need to hit on their picks, and this is going to be such a primarily defensive draft that I look at the players left available, and I think the pick here is going to be Shamar Stewart. His measurables are outstanding, and even though he didn't produce the sack numbers that I think you would want, I think being able to pair him across with Trey Hendrickson, or even be a Trey Hendrickson replacement, is just too good to pass up for Cincinnati, and have him be a potential face of the defense, and a guy who I think you could maybe afford to develop, but again, you just desperately need to have impact players on that defense. But I think with the right development, Shamar Stewart can be able to turn into that impact player. I think he's a bottle of lightning that, if you can develop correctly, can turn into a perennial Pro Bowler for you. Then we move on to Seattle of 18. So Seattle needs offensive line help. I think that's the biggest one they need. And they could go with Gray Zabel, who you can really plug anywhere into that offensive line, but the guy I'm going to go with is Kelvin Banks, just because I think he's the best offensive lineman left. He's going to be an instant upgrade to that offensive line and help further protect what clearly is going to be a more run-oriented Seahawks team, which I think is going to be the answer for them moving forward, instead of trying to go more pass-oriented like they did with Russell Wilson and with Geno Smith. They have the weapons here. I think they just need better run protection to really drive home that a potentially more dangerous run-focused Seahawks offense. At 19, we have Tampa Bay. Defense was kind of the big reason they kind of fell apart when they did. So they're obviously going to be looking at defense. They're going to be looking to upgrade that defense all throughout. I think Jahad Campbell is the pick here. I think Jahad Campbell is just very versatile. I think he's going to be a very surefire pick of the next level. And he's going to be another instant impact player for that Tampa Bay defense to help put some of the pressure off of Baker Mayfield and help the defense keep them more consistently in games. Okay, and then we have my Denver Broncos. I think it's going to come down to two separate prospects, Emeka Ibuka and Luther Burden. It's going to really come down, it's a classic case of, do you go for the more surefire prospect, who's probably more guaranteed to succeed at this level in Emeka Ibuka, or do you go for the more raw prospect, but that could reap a higher reward for you in Luther Burden? They desperately need to build around Bo Nix and get him some more receiving weapons. I'm looking at this. I'm intrigued by the prospect of Luther Burden, but I think the pick here is going to be Emeka Ibuka. I think he's just, I think just him being such a more surefire prospect is kind of what Denver needs right now. I don't think they can really afford to have yet another receiver in the wings trying to develop them like they are with Marvin Mims, who is starting to come into his own, but he's still being developed. And with Troy Franklin, I think Troy Franklin will be that primary developmental piece for them to try to work on and become a bigger impact player for them further on down the line. So I think Ibuka is going to be the pick here. Then it will be Indianapolis, who traded back to 21 here. I think they need a tight end, and they're going to pick arguably the best player available in the draft in Colston Loveland. He's very good as well, not as good as Tyler Warren, but I think you could easily have him in there and be an impact player. I think Loveland is just too good of a tight end prospect that I think he could very much be a future Pro Bowler, future All-Pro, and I think you put him in that Indianapolis offense, I think he very much has a chance to thrive with a quarterback that, although I don't think he's very good, Anthony Richardson, I think, could give Loveland more than enough time and space to be able to truly let him play to his strengths at this next level. That's, of course, if Anthony Richardson doesn't wind up throwing the ball to the other team and he actually manages to get it on target to Colson Loveland. I'm sorry, it's looking rough for y'all. I'm just saying. Then it's the Chargers at 22 who missed out on being able to get a tight end. So I think they're going to go with the defensive line here, which is kind of how those Jim Harbaugh teams work. I think he could probably take a page from his brother here. I think they're going to work on trying to improve that interior defensive line. I think there's one player here in particular, Derek Harmon, probably the best defensive lineman in the class. Well, actually, what am I saying? Of course, it's not Derek Harmon. I mean the best defensive lineman in the class left at this point. I think he's just the best. I think he's just the best option available for the Chargers to be able to better improve on their needs, which one of them was defensive line. Green Bay at 23. Now, they've had a bit of a history of not really addressing team needs, but I think they're past it. When I look at their team needs, cornerback, offensive tackle, and edge rusher left, I think edge rusher has the best player available that addresses those needs. And I know that it's derivative, it's relative when it comes to what team is going to pick the best player available and which team is going to pick the best player for their needs. I think in a case like Green Bay, they're better off picking a player that's best for their needs. And I think when I look at their team needs and I look at these players available, I think edge rusher best fits the bill. I think Mykel Williams goes to Green Bay to help potentially provide another spark to an edge rushing unit that I think desperately needs it. Then at 24, I have the Minnesota Vikings. And I think when I look at the fact that they only have 4 draft picks this entire draft, I think they're going to trade out of this spot. I think they're going to trade out with Baltimore. They're going to do a pick swap, obviously. But when it comes to other picks, I think they're going to try to get a third out of them, a fourth. I think they'll give up, say, their 4th round pick as their 4th round pick next year. And I think they try to stock up more on draft picks. So now it's the Ravens on the clock. They need a safety. And when I look at the safeties available, I think Nick Emenrory is the best one available for him. And I think he'll go in, they will pair him with Kyle Hamilton and further bolster that secondary that I think does need more bolstering. And hopefully him and Kyle Hamilton become a feared safety duo for a bit of time, or we get the most Ravens outcome possible, in which he probably makes a big blown play in an AFC title game or an AFC divisional game, or he just chokes in some significant way. Who knows? It's the Ravens, man. When it comes to Houston at 25, I think that it's going to be an offensive lineman who is going to be the biggest question. And I think because they really just need to improve on their offensive line all around. A guy like Laramie Tunsil was a Pro Bowler in name only, but they still need some sort of upgrade. I think they're going to go for the Laramie Tunsil replacement. I think Josh Simmons is the pick here. But Simmons truly is, I think, is just the best O-lineman available, and hopefully he can provide some protection for CJ Stroud. Hopefully, maybe. It's the Texans, so we'll just have to wait and see that, and hope that things don't go horrifically bad almost right away. Then we have the Rams at pick 26. They have needs, sure. But I think there's one underlying need that I think Sean McVay is going to want to address, and that's Matthew Stafford, because he's still a high-level quarterback, but he is admittedly getting up there in age. So I look at that issue, and there's one quarterback who I think is very much going to be intriguing to Sean McVay, and that's Jackson Dart. I believe that Jackson Dart, in a rather shocking move, gets scooped up by the Rams to be the heir apparent to Matthew Stafford. Will it work out? We won't know for a while, because he's going to be sitting behind Matthew Stafford, learning from him. I think it's a great pick for them at this spot. I think Dart is a guy who will probably need to be developed a little bit more. And I mean, just having that support system of Sean McVay, getting to be able to lean on a guy like Matthew Stafford, I think Dart has the chance to become a franchise quarterback for the Rams in that type of situation. Because it's just such a desirable situation to be in. Vikings are back up on the clock. I think that they have another safety here that I think they're going to address safety, because Harrison Smith is just getting so old, and he's going to stay there for as long as he can. But you need to start thinking about long-term replacements for him. I think Malachi Starks is arguably the best player left on the board, and just to have that insurance of a guy who can step in for Harrison Smith when he's done, I think that's just too good to pass up for Minnesota and just be a high-level safety, so you don't have any sort of rocky transition from one great safety to the next great Minnesota safety. So I think Malachi Starks is the pick here. Detroit at 28. Now, the thing about it is I think their biggest need is actually edge rusher, because I think it's something that they've been looking for a while, just for someone to either just bookend Aiden Hutchinson or be able to step in for him in case he's just never the same player again, which I hope to God that's not the case, because I love watching Aiden Hutchinson play football. And I look at this crop, I think I am in love with the idea of James Pierce Jr. to Detroit. Now, James Pierce Jr. is a guy, he's a very developmental prospect, has a lot of character issues, but the talent has always been undeniable. Heck, if I remember correctly, Pierce was projected to go in the top 5 or even number 1 overall in a lot of mock drafts at the start of last season. So the talent has always been undeniable. There's just been a lot, and I mean, too many character issues to count. But I truly think that Detroit is the best place for him to go to kind of get him in line and kind of get his act together. Because if you can develop this guy and keep the character issues at a minimum, oh man, this dude's he will become one of the best pass rushers in the league if he can keep the character things out of control. I think Detroit has all the systems in place to be able to do that. I think Dan Campbell's a good enough leader to be able to get James Pierce in the right place. I think this is just, I'm so in love with this pick. I think James Pierce, if he lands in Detroit, it's going to be game over for the rest of the league, man. I just don't think there's going to be no stopping him if he's in Detroit. Now, I look at Washington. Now, Dan Quinn has done an amazing job of really being able to piece together this roster and put together a really formidable team. But I think if there's one place I would say they can improve on is being able to get some youth across the line of scrimmage. And I think edge rusher is going to be kind of the pick here. They could trade out. I think they'll seek the trade out, but I don't think they'll find any suitors they like enough. I think Donovan Ezeriku, I may have gotten that wrong. Please correct me if I did get that wrong. But I think he is going to be the perfect young piece to be able to develop across that edge rusher spot. And again, if he works out, that defense becomes even more deadly. And he could very well be the thing that turns Washington from a great team into a godly team that's going to be consistently, that's going to truly find themselves in NFC title games time in and time out again. Kenneth Grant, by some people, has been considered a bit of a slide to this point, but I think the slide ends at 26 with the Bills. I think they need to strengthen up that D-line. Kenneth Grant, a lot of people have Kenneth Grant going earlier in the draft, so he kind of does slide down to 30, but man, Kenneth Grant in that Buffalo system, I think he's a great fit for Sean McDermott. Being able to land there, it's gonna be a fun time if you're Kenneth Grant or a Buffalo Bill fan to be able to have him on that D line. I think he could easily turn into a perennial Pro Bowler with that type of system around him. The Kansas City Chiefs got embarrassed in the Super Bowl mainly because that Eagles defensive line managed to just get after Mahomes all the time. So I think the need here is obvious. They need offensive linemen. They need offensive linemen badly. There's one player I honestly really like to the Chiefs here, and that's Gray Zabel. He is a guy where he can truly play anywhere on that offensive line, and I think the Chiefs would love to have a guy like that. They can plug and play him anywhere, and I think he could be a very solid piece for that offensive line for years to come if he's developed correctly. Purely as a guy who can play anywhere you want, I think you can't go wrong with a prospect like Gray Zabel like that. Then we have pick 32 with the Philadelphia Eagles. I think they could very easily trade out of this spot. I think they won't have the suitors with the picks they want to be able to do that. So I look at this team with not a ton of holes, but I do think there's a teensy bit one at wide receiver. I think they want to get a better slot receiver in and maybe even potentially be a replacement for AJ Brown whenever he leaves Philadelphia. So I'm actually going to have them pick Luther Burden here with the final pick in the first round. I think he could be an excellent slot receiver for Philadelphia and potentially give him the development time. I think he could grow into a potential #1 wide receiver, and I think that's why Philadelphia is going to take that type of risk on Burton to be that high-level player. So, ladies and gentlemen, here is my official first round mock draft 2.0 with trades. I did this more with kind of like a mix of what I think the teams themselves would do, but also what I personally would do in these situations. Because I mean, let's be real, I probably more with the perspective of what I think the teams would do, but also keep in mind, I'm just a guy from his undisclosed location making these videos and not getting paid millions of dollars to make these types of decisions. So truly, what do I know? But here's just a look at that at this final mock draft, and filling this out was definitely fun. Filling this out was definitely I definitely love doing these types of mock drafts, and just the draft process has always really fascinated me with how convoluted and complicated and dare I say stressful it can get, especially when you're picking these later rounds. You just don't know who's going to fall to you. But since I'm always right, I think this is how this is guaranteed how it's going to turn out. But with that being said, ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary friends, thank you very much for watching. And of course, my name is Aidan Rouse, and that is my take.